Hi, and welcome back. I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and we're back with another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. And today we're talking to Alesha Escobar, and we're going to talk about the Tower's Alchemist, and that's really exciting. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. I say we, but it's just me.
But I'm sure you wear many hats, so
Oh, of
kind of a
course, we
team.
all do. We all do. Yeah. So, why don't you tell us about the Tower's Alchemist?
Oh, definitely for sure. Well, The Tower's Alchemist was my debut novel that I first published back in 2011.
Wow.
And it's near and dear to my heart because, first, it's pretty much the last book my mother read before she passed away. And also, it was born from a writing challenge that my husband gave me. I was searching for something to write, getting back into my passion for it. And he said, "Hey, how about a fantasy story with a spy? High action, but set it in World War II,
Oh,
make it
wow.
alternate history." And I'm like, I like that. I'm like, I could write something with that. And then I had to decide, wait a minute, what were women doing during that time? Because we hear all the stories of, like Rosie the Riveter, and, they went out to work in the factories and things like that, back home. But on the front lines, in the war zones, in Nazi occupied, France, for example, women were literally parachuting into there after receiving, a certain amount of training from British intelligence or, the French resistance, and acting as spies. And they did this because Winston Churchill said, we need people who would go in, kind of be unnoticed, because who would notice a woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she would use her skills and her training to relay information back to the resistance, to the Allies, and basically to help win the war. And so The Tower's Alchemist is about a jaded spy named Isabella, who has been a spy for quite a while. And she's like, you know what? I'm tired of this. My friends keep dying, and I want to retire to a normal life. And the reason why they recruited her is because she happens to be a wizard trained by the
Oh,
prestigious Gray
wow.
Tower. And the Nazis at this point have decided, we're going to get vampires and monsters on our side, and we'll just overwhelm our enemies and win the war. And of course, the British, the Americans, the French, they're like, no, wait, you're not gonna, you're not gonna get one up on us. We're going to recruit wizards, and we'll match you. And so Isabella is one of these wizards, but she reluctantly agrees to one final mission, which is to get into Paris unnoticed, extract a warlock who's creating this deadly alchemical weapon called the plague, and then you'll get to go home and live your life, find your true love, whatever. And so she's like, okay, I'll do it. But then it gets complicated because she ends up getting betrayed by someone within her own organization, and she has to
Oh,
find out
no.
who did it. She's also being hunted down by one of these vampires.
Oh, wow.
And of course, she has to decide what she wants in her life, whether it's romantically, because there are two possible love interests, as well as kind of like a huge secret circling her family history. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. Let's meet her. You got an excerpt that you can read us?
Oh, wow. Just so I
It's
won't
always
like cause like a crazy gap in time,
okay.
if I can maybe recall something from memory that she says.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, or you could even read, like, the first chapter or something just so we can
okay.
get a sense of
Oh,
the
okay.
of her from her hear her, in her own words.
Okay, great. I'm going to pull this out right now.
Okay.
This is from chapter 1. Starts off with her in a dark forest in Denmark with a Danish soldier, and they're doing a radio broadcast so they can help any allies that are in the area, because they would send coded messages through radio broadcasts on their channels. So she says, "I never imagined my first trip to Denmark would include crouching in a forest in the dark of night, but at least the beech trees gave Lighter and me much needed cover. I rose to my feet and stood over him, jerking my head to the right to indicate that we needed to pack up and head out. When he waved me off, I shut the transmitter case with my foot and trained my Sten gun on him. He glared at me. I wasn't done with my radio transmission. You went over by 5 minutes. That means they'll be coming. I had little patience for people who did things that would get me killed." He pulled out a pistol and grabbed the case. "I'm ready." I flinched when the first gunshot rang. It took the ESS little effort to pinpoint our position. Lighter jumped to his feet and ran with me through the forest. I breathed in through my nose and mouth like I do when I take in a jog. I felt a cold lump in the pit of my stomach as my shoes haphazardly crushed dry leaves and twigs beneath them. We heard voices, dogs barking, and where the forest cleared, we saw the headlights of a trekker standing in the middle of the road. Great, we've just been flanked. And then from that point on, she finds out that they have a warlock with them, and she has to use her abilities as an alchemist to fend him off.
Oh wow. So in your world, you've got women as wizards, and it sounds like, so are alchemists and wizards the same thing, or is there like a classification system?
The classification is a wizard is anyone, man or woman, who has magical abilities. And if it's just meager, meager ability, the Gray Tower will ignore you. But if you show some promise, or if they are afraid you'll kill someone accidentally, they'll train you at the Gray Tower. And you can either choose to stay with them, rise within the ranks, become a master wizard. They'll send you out to become advisors to people, in politics and government. Or they'll just, send you home like, okay, we've trained you enough so that you don't kill someone. Now go home. And a warlock is someone who basically use their powers for evil. And they are often not trained by the Gray Tower, but are trained by kind of a rival organization known as the Black Wolves. And it's headed by a vampire named Octavia. And another thing with the warlocks is either you are born one, just like the wizards, you're naturally born with these abilities. Kind of like the concept of being born a mutant with X-Men.
Mm.
Or you can make a pact with a demon to obtain powers.
Oh, wow.
But the catch is that if you do this, you become a vampire. And that's why the vampires in the story, they feed off of other wizards. So they have to feed off of other wizards and steal their powers. And eventually they become monsters themselves. And they lose their sense of reason, their humanity, and they become deformed.
Do they have to die after they make the pact with the demons to get the powers, or they just automatically become the vampire without having to do the whole dying thing?
They become the vampire without dying.
That's cool.
Yes.
That's a cool twist on it. So is there a real Gray Tower, or is it just the name of the group? Is it like, is there an actual Gray Tower that people go to, like Hogwarts or whatever for training?
Yeah, there is actually. I think one of my reviewers actually mentioned like a grown-up Harry Potter in a sense, because there is an actual Gray Tower that they go to, and it's hidden, obviously, because they know that if their enemies knew their location, they would descend upon them. And also, a lot of master wizards tend to be arrogant and hold themselves a little bit above humanity. So they're like, it's not worth, other people, outsiders, knowing where we are actually located. So they'll bring in people who they need or who they want, but they'll do it in a way where, to the normal human mind, they couldn't determine where they are in the world. But it's actually located like in Czechoslovakia. At that time, It was Czechoslovakia, and in 1941. So she went there, after college. She trained, and then she went to Isabella. She went to London afterwards. She dropped out. She's like, these people are not my cup of tea. So she decided to go work for the British intelligence, and she lies to her family back home in America because she's American. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm in the ambassador's office, and I'm doing great. But she's really going on all these dangerous missions, and that's one of her other motivations to quit, is because she's like, I want to see my mom, I want to see my brother, and I'm stuck here lying to them, and I would hate for something to happen to me and my handler have to call them up and say, I'm so sorry, your daughter wasn't just working in the ambassador's office in London, she was on a mission in France, and she got taken out by a vampire.
Oh, wow. So, what does the Gray Tower do during World War II? Because Czechoslovakia was invaded, if I'm not misremembering.
Yes, it was invaded. And the Tower's Alchemist takes place in the summer of 1941. And during that time, they were overrun. And in fact, they had started rounding up some Jews at that time, as well as just, killing people, to instill fear and submission. And so people were fleeing that area, and they were going to other countries. They were going to France. They were trying to find help with the part of France that was still, involved in the resistance, because France was split. It was like the compliant government was like, okay, let's just go along with what Germany wants, and then there was the other half who was like, we're going to fight. And so Isabella, she's trying to help out the resistance. She has connections there, and one of her closest connections is a woman named Renee, who runs a safe house basically for spies who come in, and she's like a mother figure, a mentor to her. And another secondary character, which I just love, is Jasmine, who is also kind of like a spy and informant, but she's also a performer, and she's inspired by the singer and actress Josephine Baker, who was in Paris at that time and who did, spy on behalf of the resistance. So it was just fun, bringing in those different threads of history and history inspired characters into the story.
No, this is so cool. I grew up on stories of World War II. The Hungarian side of my family came to the U.S. during World War II, right after Hitler invaded. So anything about World War II gets my instant attention because there's like family history involved in that.
Awesome.
And and there's so much family history that was lost too, because we don't know what happened to a lot of my grandfather got out, but we don't know what happened to a lot of his siblings or to my great grandparents or any of his cousins or anything. There's just my uncle went back and there's just no records of anything.
Wow.
We don't even know what he couldn't read or write English, so we don't even know what village he was from. Because he was like 21 when he came here. When he snuck out of Hungary and came to the US. He had a sister here, so it was like, I'm getting out of there, right? I don't belong here. He had two sisters here in the US, and he was like, I'm leaving. I'm done. I'm gone. So yeah, no, I find this all very fascinating.
Yes, definitely. And just doing the research for all this, it really gave you great perspective on history, what happened during that time.
Yeah.
And I kind of wove that into the story, and doing it with a fantasy, it expresses kind of like that metaphor of, if you hold power and you choose to do either good or evil with it, it has a huge impact, on yourself, on other people, and the world. And so with warlocks, I thought it was fitting that many of them do become vampires and do turn into these monstrosities because they've lost their humanity. They've chosen that dark path. Yeah. And then our hero, Isabella, she chose another path. She wants to fight for justice. She wants to save lives and see peace. And, it kind of takes a toll on her. And, that's why she's at the point where she's ready to quit. But deep in her heart, she knows that she can't quit.
Yeah, World War II is like, I think it's just tailor-made for fantasy, because it's almost like, it's almost like a Lord of the Rings-esque,
yes,
sort of war, because you had clear like good and evil. Like there was the Nazis, and they were very clearly evil, and anybody who was fighting against them was you were fighting for all of humanity, basically, in a way, because they were out to exterminate anybody who wasn't like them, and their definition of them was super, like, I wouldn't fit it. It's super specific and narrow.
So I had a lot of fun with it, and just using those characters and the villains. Some of them are a little bit complex, and you have some redemption arcs going on too with one or two people. But yeah, this was like a clear line, right, of these bad guys who are looking to just throw everyone into submission, kill anyone who defied them. And so in telling that story, you get an idea of what people went through. And believe me, like, my story does not do it justice. I can never represent the horrors that went on and what people went through, but at least maybe just having that in the story can encourage people to maybe go find out the history and look into it more, because these are some amazing stories, especially the women who did the spying, did the footwork. I didn't even know they existed until I did this research, and their stories just amazed me. One of my favorites was Nancy Wake. She was from New Zealand, and she got involved because her, I believe it was, if I remember correctly, her husband was killed, if I'm not mistaking her for one of the other women, but she got involved, and she was like a total badass. And she went in, parachuted into Paris under the cover of night, and she got into a confrontation with a Nazi, and she thought it was like hogwash when the British intelligence like told her how to fight martial arts. She's like, this is useless. What am I going to do with this? And she actually did it, and she literally killed the Nazi with her bare hands. Already chopped him to the neck and killed him. And so
after that, it's like, okay, maybe this is actually useful.
Yeah. I can help with this skill.
No, it was such a time too. Like there's so many stories, and it's a history that we don't want to repeat. So it's important that people go back and look into it, because there was so much. And then after that, after World War II, then we had the Iron Curtain come down, and all of things get crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to relive all of that. We want peace, and almost like there's some parallels between World War II and what's going on with Ukraine and Russia at the moment. Like there's a lot of atrocities and things, not to the same level, but I just hope that that's not going to go into another type of war like that.
Yeah, definitely, because war is not a cakewalk. It causes human suffering, pain, damage, loss. Like you said, how your family members, it's hard for them to locate where they came from, their village, their records.
There's no records.
It destroys so much. So hopefully, we don't repeat that cycle.
I hope we don't. Like, and there's so much like culture and stuff that like I don't know about because it's all gone. Like there was a couple authors who were on earlier in this series. They were talking about like Slavic mythology and how hard it was to piece that together because once the World War II ended and the Iron Curtain came down, like Russia tried to completely eradicate all of what was there, and now there's sort of a resurgence of that, which I think is great. And I wish that I had grown up with some of that, but like I don't know anything about it. And that's like one of the costs of World War II that's still echoing down through the generations, that so many of our families like fled during World War II and integrated into countries where they went to, and like we've lost a lot of that.
Yes. So there's a lesson to be learned in there for sure.
Yeah. And not to mention like how many people lost their lives, like between the soldiers and the people who were in the Nazi death camps. Like it's just the human cost of that war was just astronomical. I think it's awesome that you're like, taking one small piece of it and putting it in a fantasy book, and because that just it brings it back into our collective consciousness and says, hey, we can't forget about this. They were amazing women doing amazing things. Like they were women aviators. Like I read a book recently and I was like, I did not know this, that there weren't, because it was such a, there was such a high death toll in World War II that after a while, like they were running out of pilots and things. And some women were like, hey, I could do this too. I want to be up there doing this,
Exactly. Yes.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, their stories just really impacted me. And in fact, with the Kickstarter, one of the rewards will be like a mini documentary that I'm making on several of these women. So I'm so excited about that.
Are you going to, I don't know if any of them are still alive. Some, because I know a lot of the World War II generation
Right.
it's been, many of them were born in like, 1920 or, and they'd be 100 years old now. So many of them are just not around anymore to be interviewed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they are. I know that Nancy Wake passed away around 2015, 2016. And then, obviously the ones who didn't even make it past the war, like Violet Zabo, they actually made a great movie about her. It's called Carve Her Name with Pride, starring Virginia McKenna. It's such a great movie.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. So for your documentary, you're just going to be researching, or is there anyone you'll be interviewing for it?
I'll be doing research and putting, together like, photos and video footage with voiceover. I'm hoping to at least get in 1 or 2 interviews. We shall see. That's my goal because, might as well make it as fun as I can.
Yeah, I know. It's such a cool project. That's why I backed it immediately. And when you were like, hey, can I come on the podcast? I was like, yes, please. Let's find a time. Let's make this happen. Let's talk about it. Definitely. Yeah, and you've got so many other cool things in the Kickstarter too, like the hardcover books with, I think they're the sprayed edges.
Yeah, sprayed edges. That's going to be fun. I'm gearing up for that, and as well as the bookmark and postcard art. And the postcards have my husband's version of Isabella, his portrayal of her, which is really cool. And for those who don't know, my husband is a storyboard artist for the Simpsons TV show. So,
which I think is so cool.
And he tells me whenever I ask him, because everyone asks me to ask him if they really know how to predict, events, because they're like, oh, the Simpsons predicted this. And he says no.
Does he have a favorite character to draw?
I never asked him. Like I never cared to ask, But I think he enjoys, drawing them all. Maybe Maggie. Maybe Maggie's his favorite. And it's so funny too because several of the artists also know how to do the voices. And
that's fun.
Because they all day they have to like listen to the voice actors and draw. So
they must be sick of the dialogue after a while.
Oh yeah, and since he works from home, I'm like sometimes I'm like right across from him and I hear the same scene playing over and over.
That's so wild. That's so wild. And he's replaying them because he's doing the art for it, or?
Yes. Sometimes he's doing the storyboards. Sometimes he's doing, layout. So it depends.
Do they do the voiceovers before he does the storyboarding or after?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. I don't know anything about cartoons other than I have watched The Simpsons, obviously. I grew up watching that.
Right?
I don't know who didn't.
We're watching it too. So it's so funny because we waited a while before showing our children. And once we finally start letting them watch the show, because technically it's not a kids show.
No, it's not. But like it's so ubiquitous, like, and so many people talk about it and reference it, and it's in all the memes that like it'd be hard to keep it from them, but because then they would just not know what people were talking about, and they'd end up like just going on YouTube and finding clips of it anyways.
Exactly.
Better if you control the experience.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. So the Towers Alchemist is book 1 of a trilogy.
Yes.
And are there going to be are there going to be future books in this
There
world?
won't be future books. I'm keeping it just as a trilogy, so it's a completed story. And I'm glad for that, because I think it finished naturally. There's nothing more to a lot of it, unless maybe at some point if I want to do maybe some prequel stuff or short stories, that's a possibility. But for the most part, like as for novel length works, it's complete as a trilogy.
Okay. Because it might be kind of neat to do the Iron Curtain years, how that changes things between the Gray Tower and the
maybe actually maybe
with like the Cold War and stuff. Extending ideas. I find all that, like the whole Cold War thing, there was a lot of spying, going on there, and a lot of it was women in the Cold War, because same thing. You don't suspect them, and there's just especially with like the whole tensions between Russia and the US, there was just a lot of spying going on.
Yes, I actually do have a Russian spy in the story who's kind of a nemesis of Isabella. Her name is Nikon Preskovia, and she's telekinetic and also a very good fighter, hand-to-hand combat, and she does not like Isabella. She partners with the vampires to try to take her down, so it's fun.
Oh wow, so you already had the Russian agent turning on them even before that happened at the end of the war?
Yes.
Sort of foreshadowing. That's pretty wild. And then
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Hey, I guess while I'm mentioning the Towers Alchemist and what I have in store for it, I just had a meeting yesterday with a couple of producers, because we're in talks for developing the screenplay for film adaptation. So I'm excited about that.
Oh wow, and how is the writer's strike going to affect that?
I know it couldn't have come at a worse time, right? It's like,
yeah,
get a screenplay, nobody's writing. We're looking at actually, because everything is pretty much set in Europe for the Towers Alchemist, obviously the shoots would be in Europe. We're looking at just getting a European writer to do the script.
Oh, that's exciting.
So maybe we can kind of get around that. But we're not 100% counting out an American writer, but more than likely we'll probably go with someone over there, especially since it's all based in Europe anyway. And
that would make sense. And is this with like a major motion picture company, or like you doing this as an indie thing, or?
Independent for now, and depending on once we get into pre-production, we'll see if we can attach to a studio and eventually get the distribution, everything done. So but like our first step right now, because like I'm like, can I hop on as co-producer? And so
wow.
with securing the screenwriter and the script. So unfortunately I'm not at that skill level yet to like write my own screenplays. That would have been awesome. So I would rather trust that particular work to seasoned screenwriter who can bring the story to life in that format, because even though both are storytelling, there are two different types of writing.
Yeah. And would you be whatchamacallit? I can't think of the words. Would you be involved with the script writing, or like they would write it, would you review it, or they're just going to write it and you're just going to accept whatever it is? Or
I would review it, because I'm getting in as with co-producer status. I'm able to kind of view that and have some input. Just good, and I promise not to be the kind of person who's like, it has to be this way or no way at all.
Yeah. That's so exciting though. Like that's so cool that it's going to be, maybe in a couple of years we could be seeing it in the theater.
Yes, it'd be so awesome. So another reason why I want this whole like crazy conflict over there to end, right? It's like, people want to work, people want to do business, people want to live their lives, and then it's like all of this crazy stuff going on too in the backdrop. So hopefully we can see peace over there, and and thoughts are definitely with, people who have already suffered. Yeah, it's like sometimes we take for granted the safety that we have because geographically where we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. And yeah, I definitely kind of touch upon that in my story.
Yeah, no, it's just hearing some of the stories over there, like especially the destruction of the dam and how much damage it's done to lives. And it's to see it happening in our lifetime it's chilling. I grew up on stories of World War II, and like it feels like echoes from the past almost. Like it's not the same conflict, it's not over the same thing, but it just feels like the past is trying to repeat itself. Maybe not exactly as it did, but like that. I think, yeah, maybe it's because my family is from, Eastern Europe, that it's very much pressing on my on my mind, and my thoughts are with the people over there. I've donated, as much as I can. It's just, I was hoping with the whole thing with what's his name, the paramilitary group, I can't think of his name.
Wagner group?
Yes, that when all that was going down, I was hoping that would put the nail in the coffin, and we would be seen, but it's still going on. So, and there are like just lives being lost and disrupted, and it's, yeah, I hope we see an end to it soon. But it's completely like wrecked that whole region. It would take a long, even if there was peace tomorrow, it would take a long time to rebuild, and then there would be the uneasy, it would still be tension there because it happened now once. It could happen again.
Exactly.
I hope lasting peace comes in our time, but I think that would take like a change of leadership and just a change of mindset over there, and that might be harder to achieve. I don't know.
Right. It's so tough. But then I think that's why we need people to speak out for what is right and to be heroes. And
reminds people of like, hey, when this in the past, somebody thought they were right and their way was the right way, and look at the toll and what it caused and how many countries and people were affected by it, and that it's starting here, but it could drag a whole lot of other nations into it if not careful.
Exactly.
Which is one thing that I worry about, because there's all the NATO countries around it, and the U.S. is part of NATO. So it's definitely a tense situation, and we'll have, like, because that's what happened with World War I, was all the alliances that everybody was entangled and dragged a lot of people into this war, and a lot of them were like didn't really know the Archduke who got assassinated and didn't really care too much, but because they had all these mutual alliances, it was like, well, we kind of have to legally get involved in this, even though it doesn't really have anything to do with us. Just watching the world stage and hoping for the best, and that's what one of the great things with fantasy is. We can right the wrongs of the past, we can remind about them, and we can do so with a lot of magic and maybe have a little fun along the way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, and the Towers Alchemist in the whole series is cool. But shining a light on the accomplishments of women, and I hope people check out your Kickstarter. It's very cool.
Thank you so much.
Lots of cool stuff. And I'm excited about the documentary, and excited to hear there's going to be a film. That's like very cool. Even if it takes years to come about. I know these things are quick.
Right.
It's very cool. It'd be like live action, or is your husband going to be drawing it?
It will be live action, but might pull him for like storyboards, like movie storyboards.
Yeah. So he's not yet on the project, but could be.
Not yet, but I have certain influence.
You have plans for him. What do your kids think about all this?
Oh wow! Well, my daughter, she's my eldest. She's in high school, and she really enjoys it. She thinks it's so cool. She actually is taking after me, being kind of like a little writer herself. She's in a creative writing club, and she, kind of help me with bouncing off ideas and things like that. So it's interesting to get her thinking as a creative, thinking as an artist. She has that dual ability because she also likes to draw, and she, so she takes after dad in that respect. So the younger kids, they're kind of like, okay, that's cool, mommy.
They're not interested.
and then my second eldest, my son, he's like, okay, I have 2 of your books, and I promise I'll read them. I'm like, okay.
I have to finish them. I have like such a huge TBR, and this podcast here is just making it longer. But I'll get through them all. I'll get through them all someday. Will happen. Not sure when exactly, but it will happen. Maybe by then you'll have.
We'll find you buried under a pile of books.
I mean, sometimes, thankfully, most of the TBR is digital, so if it falls on me, it won't hurt. Digital books don't weigh anything. But yeah, I'm just always adding to it. Yeah. But yeah, no, this was awesome. Is there anything else you want to say about the Towers Alchemist or the Kickstarter or the books in the series?
Yeah, just check out the Kickstarter. You can just type in the search bar Gray Tower, and it'll pop up. And also keep up with my socials for updates on the film adaptation, as well as any special announcements I may have. And yeah, I'm excited. Oh, also for anyone who's in the California area and they're attending San Diego Comic-Con on the 22nd, I'll be on a panel, so you can meet me in person there.
Which panel are you going to be on?
I will be on the spiritual themes in comics panel.
Oh wow!
So,
what are they going to be talking about? I'll be probably at work at my day job that day, unless it's a weekend, and then I'll be here, maybe doing a podcast recording. Such is my life.
But yeah, it's I think it's gonna be kind of like a free for all. I know that I'm gonna be talking about Constantine. That's my favorite comic, and it deals with the supernatural, a little bit dark, but I just love the Hellblazer comics.
Yeah, I know Constantine. I haven't looked at an issue in a long time. I should probably rectify that.
They're good.
In the free time that I don't have.
I'll read something else.
Yeah, it's just I used to be a huge comic book nerd and had the big collection of mostly Marvel, but I also liked Image Comics and Dark Horse. And now I know there's many other imprints out there. I just haven't kept up with it. There's just not enough time in the day anymore. But that's really cool that you're going to be at the Comic-Con. So, and if people are, for those listening to it after the Kickstarter has finished, your books are available or widely available on the different retailers: Amazon, Apple, Google Play. That's where I got my copies. Barnes and Noble, Kobo. I'm forgetting somebody. All the places.
Yeah, all the places.
And I think you also do some. And you might have some on your website too.
Yes, I do have my ebooks for sale on my website directly at aleshaescobar.com. So yeah, stop by and visit.
Yeah. No, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could just discuss all of this with you. I'm so excited.
No, thank you. And this has been Fantasy Lore and More, and I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and this is Alesha Escobar. Am I saying that right?
Alicia.
It's Alicia. Okay. I'm sorry. Alesha Escobar. And
I'm used to the Alesha because my in-laws are Hispanic, my husband's Hispanic, so they're like Alesha.
That's pretty. That's really pretty. I like that. Alicia. That's really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. I'll have all the notes in the show notes. I'm sorry, all the links in the show notes or the description, depending on where you are listening or watching. And that'll do it for this. So I'll see you next time for another book and another fantasy author. Have a good day or good night wherever you are.